there's a lovely blurb in the program about this year's award recipient that gives you the details of the broad career of Mr. Handy. I'll be speaking briefly about my experience of him in the mid-'80s as his student. He wore a lot of hats at Academy at the time, and I managed to interact with him in each of those roles. The first and most relevant to this moment is that he was my public speaking teacher. And back in the days, alums of my vintage will recognize this, the 3x5 card. Younger alums and seniors, this is what we got in our junior speech. We didn't get our whole speech. So this is entirely as a tribute to Mr. Handy. I'm speaking from a 3x5 card, and it had nothing to do with the fact that my printer wouldn't work this morning. So, Mr. Handy was our director of plays, but he was the theater department, really. Not only did he direct plays, he also designed the theater, he built the sets, he managed all of the costumes and props, and he did the lighting and everything, and he was a very intense director. At one point, he came down during intermission to tell us that he had bitten through his pipe when the Dansker and Claggart had forgotten their lines. He was a terrific teacher, and that's where I really knew him. I had him as a teacher in 10th grade and 12th grade, and through his use of Hemingway's short stories and Robert Frost's poetry and the tragedies of Shakespeare and Perrine's Sound and Sense, he taught us to be very good readers and very good writers. And I'm sure I speak for all of my fellow alums that when we went to college, when we had classmates who had gone to Exeter or Andover or any of the St. Rugglesex schools, that we knew they had nothing on us because we had Mr. Handy as a teacher. But more importantly, Mr. Handy taught us two very important lessons. One was that literature, well written and very well read, could provide young people, any people, with experiences they could not have achieved otherwise, particularly in Central Ohio in a pre-internet age. But also, he taught us to seek out real experiences and to savor lives well led. And for that, I'm very thankful. With that, I would just like to, well, say one more thing. He didn't expect us to become writers, but he expected us to live like writers, or live as though we might become writers. So, I'd like to introduce my teacher and this year's Alumni Service recipient, Mr. Bob Handy.
Well, it's been some time since I've been up on a podium, about 20 years. At first I thought, well, I'll talk a lot about my various students and what I remember them and so forth, and my colleagues who I'm delighted to see here. But now, since I'm very humbled by Andy's introduction, I don't think I can equal anything that he has said. I had a story that Alan Jones told me. I had stories of students that Jeremy Mitchell has told me. But I'm going to make this short. I have just a few words to say, and I too had a problem with my printer last night. But finally, I found the directions to get the thing started again, so I do have something I wrote. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to read it because the mind just doesn't memorize well anymore. First of all, I am glad to be back home. Let me explain. When I retired in 1995, after 42 years of teaching in secondary schools, 20 at the academy, my wife and I moved to a farm in New York's Adirondacks. After I was divorced, I bought a home upstate there myself, where I lived with my 2 Labrador retrievers. And I volunteered at a local art museum as a docent, which satisfied my yearning to teach somewhat. However, periodic visits to my children and their families on the East Coast did not assuage my homesickness for my friends back here in Columbus, my former students and colleagues. I made frequent visits back here, but last year at Christmas, I was asked why I remained up north by myself. So I decided to move back to Columbus. With the aid of a former student, Jeremy Mitchell, I found a beautiful condo in Upper Arlington, and he and a friend traveled north in a truck, and then after I'd sold my home, he moved me by van back to Columbus. And it's certainly good to be back home. What makes my return doubly gratifying is to be remembered by this Alumni Award, the years of service to the Academy. But in truth, I must say that more significantly, it represents to me the wonderful years of service the Academy gave to me. After I was contacted by Eric Hunker about this award, I began thinking of the reasons why I look forward to each day of teaching, each theater production I directed, and each memorized junior speech rehearsed and lucidly delivered. Over the years, I have heard from many of my former Academy students about what a taskmaster I was and how much I required them by holding them to high standards. Sometimes they thought too high. I guess I was tough, but I found that each class and activity was characterized by stretching Academy students to amazing personal achievements, intellectually and emotionally, by teaching great literature. And even more, and I stretched them more than they could realize, or even more than I expected. These experiences were exciting to me, and because a kind of passion to see how much many Academy students could accomplish. Thus, I look forward to challenging students each day in class, and although spending whole weekends reading essays was arduous, I was well repaid by noting with joy the improvements in writing skills and the gems of thought and creativity I encountered over and over again. I'm indebted to Columbus Academy for giving me students with such amazing potential. I feel that they truly enriched my career in education. As a retired teacher, I miss these wonderful experiences the most. My daily joy in instructing classes in literature and composition, and coaching talented young actors and public speakers. For this reason, more than being honored by the alumni for my years of service to the Academy, this award represents to me the years of joyful service Columbus Academy gave to me. And as I say, it is good to be back home among my friends, my former students and colleagues, and who provide me with my memories of those wonderful 20 years. Thank you so much, Columbus Academy.